everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with another exciting weekly forecast. And this one is for Monday, October 15th, all the way through to Sunday, October 21st of 2018. And this week, there's not a lot of craziness or chaos going on in the astrology, luckily. We've had, I think, enough of that in the past few weeks. But there are going to be some interesting aspects. We're going to be having Mercury come into a conjunction with Venus on Monday, which is really great for communication and conversation, for connecting with people. Using language, right? Because that's Mercury. But for connecting with people and forming community, forming bonds with people, communicating and articulating your thoughts in a way that's very beautiful, poetic, in a way that sort of flows really nicely. So if you have any important conversations that you need to have, that might be a nice time to initiate those conversations. I will say, though, that Mercury is going to be sort of highlighting that square between Venus and Mars that happened last week. So if you had a lot of difficulty and conflict through the middle of last week, I would say that this might be highlighting that, but I think it would bring a little bit more of like a resolution through communication with other people, right? As opposed to the arguments and disputes that could have been a little bit more predominant last week, especially because we had the Sun in a really tight square with Pluto midweek as well. So there was a lot going on last week. But this week, it's mostly Mercury just going to be, Mercury is going to be highlighting certain points in the chart. And so we have that Mercury conjunction to Venus on Monday, which is really great for conversations, for communicating with other people. The moon is really nicely aspected all day, actually, on Monday as well. So I think that's going to be actually a pretty nice day. It seems like probably a pretty good electional day as well, just because the last aspect that the moon will make before it leaves the sign of Capricorn, where it'll be on Monday, is going to be a sextile to Jupiter, right? So that indicates that, the end results of anything that occurs on Monday will be beneficial. Although on Tuesday there is, some turbulent aspects with the moon, so there could be a little bit of complication there. So, Monday's a really nice day. Tuesday there's a little bit of complexity going on, a little bit more intensity on an emotional level. But for the most part, this week is looking pretty nice. And then as we come into Friday, Mercury is actually going to be coming into a really nice trine with Neptune at the same time that it's squaring Mars. And that's where we can get into a little bit of difficulty, because Mercury square Mars is an indication that we might be speaking before we think things through, right? Where as opposed to like Monday, we might have a really nice balanced way of communicating our thoughts, our ideas. We might be able to articulate our thoughts in a way that might be more easily well received by other people. We might be able to convey information a little bit more harmoniously, beautifully, where we're considering the needs and the perceptions and perspectives of the other before we're saying something, right? Well, Friday, that it's a completely different story, because not only do we have Mercury in a trine with Neptune, which is really great for creative communication, for daydreaming, for like coming up with ideas, plans for the future in sort of a big picture, idealistic sort of way. It's really good for fantasizing about the future. It's really good for daydreaming in general, right? It's really good for creative forms of communication, like creative writing, and things like that. But we're also going to have at the same time Mercury square Mars. And so Mercury in trine with Neptune makes us a little less self-aware of what it is that we're saying, just because that's the nature of Neptune. Even in a trine, it can bring a little bit of difficulty in that respect, because we're not going to be thinking in a way that's super logical, linear, because even though Mercury is in the sign of Scorpio, which is very perceptive, very straightforward, very hyper-focused, very straight to the point, right? And it's a very good, I actually really like when Mercury's in Scorpio, because people's minds become very sharp. So even though we have that, we also have this sort of flowy aspect from Neptune, which will soften our language a little bit, which will soften our thoughts, our communications, and it'll make us think about things a little bit more intuitively, right? A little bit more in terms of energy, intuition, interconnectedness, creativity, right? Because that's that Neptunian energy. It'll make us a little bit more compassionate toward other people, and a little bit more compassionate in terms of the language that we're utilizing. But as I was starting to say, that square to Mars sort of negates that a little bit, because when Mercury squares Mars, our thoughts can become very quick, we might react rather than respond to the information that's coming in. It can make us very impulsive in our speech and in what we say to other people. And so this can cause, issues and complications in certain areas. And so, as long as you're able to slow things down and to think before you speak, because Mercury's already in a sign that can come across as very harsh, because, that's Scorpio, right? Scorpio is very deliberate, very blunt, very to the point, and especially when it feels threatened, it can strike, right? Because that's the nature of the Scorpion. I'm outside right now, so there's, nature. There's a nature bee flying around me right now. But yeah, so speaking of striking and stinging, this is a time when our language can be a little bit more abrasive, and our words can hurt people, so we need to be very careful and very mindful of what we say. Otherwise, a lot of us, especially people who are affected by this very strongly, who have their sun, moon, rising at those middle degrees of Scorpio or at those middle degrees of Aquarius, we're going to end up putting our foot in our mouth, right? We're going to end up sort of saying something and then having to take it back, or having to apologize, or hurting somebody unintentionally just because we're speaking very directly and very impulsively. It's not that necessarily our intentions will be to hurt people. It's just that that's the way that it can come across. This can also indicate arguments, conflicts, especially verbal arguments with other people, hurt feelings, those types of things. So that's just something to kind of be mindful of and be aware of. But luckily, we do have that really beneficial aspect from Neptune. So if we are saying something impulsively, it's probably coming from a deeper sort of realm, it's probably coming from somewhere else. It's coming through intuitively. It's coming through from like a higher place. And so hopefully the combination of these aspects will have you intuiting something and then saying it without necessarily overthinking it, right? But on the flip side of that, Mars square Mercury can be overthinking things. It can be thinking very quickly, speaking very quickly, right? When you have Mercury aspects to Mars, people's thoughts are going to be racing a little bit more. People are going to be speaking a lot more. I have my dog out here too. I should have gotten rid of the interruptions before I started recording this. But anyway, so people are going to be thinking very quickly. This can be a difficult aspect for people who are already prone to nervous tension and anxiety. So just kind of be aware of that. But other than that, I do think that, it's going to be a pretty nice week. We have, mostly positive aspects going on. The moon is doing some really great stuff, especially at the start of the week and at the end of this week. And so, it's a good time. It's a good time overall. We do still have Venus in retrograde, so obviously be cautious of new relationships that come in and all of those normal Venus retrograde things that we did talk about a couple of weeks ago when Venus first stationed to go retrograde. But yeah, for the most part, this is going to be a pretty chill week. There's not a whole lot of chaos going on. So let's get into the forecast for all 12 signs. And before we do that, I do want to mention that I'm doing my very first foundational astrology course. It begins on November 10th, and it's going to be a very small group course. I'm only allowing 10 people in, and I still actually do have a couple of slots open. So if you want to jump in on that and be a part of the group, I'm really excited about the group that we already have, and I'm excited to do this in a more intimate setting where we can work one-on-one with everybody, and we can get to know each other throughout the course and all of that, so everybody can get the individual attention that they would want and deserve in a course like this. And I'm even doing one-on-one tutoring sessions with each person in the course. So you can sign up for the course. The link is in the description below. It's a perfect course for beginners, so you can get a really solid foundation in astrology to sort of branch off of. And this is the final week to get $10 off my webinar with Robert Phoenix. It's the AstroNavigation for 2019 webinar, where we're going to be going really deep into a lot of the major aspects that are going to be affecting us throughout 2019. Hi, Jake. And beyond into 2020. Jake's going to be starring in this video apparently today as well. I should have put him inside. I'm sorry, you guys. But yeah, so I'm doing that video with Robert Phoenix. It's on October 20th, or that webinar with Robert Phoenix. It's on October 20th. We're going to be going really deep into the major events that are going to be affecting us for the next year and a half. So be sure to sign up for that. $10 off in the description below. But now we're going to get into all 12 signs, starting with Aries. Jake here, I believe, is an Aries. He's pretty fiery and intense, as you can see. He's chasing the bugs. I might have to pause this and get him out of here. All right, I'm sorry about that, you guys. So now we're going to get into the forecast for all 12 signs, beginning with Aries, of course. And so for Aries and for Aries rising, a lot of this energy is going to be occurring in your 8th house, which is the house of debt. It's the house of taxes. It's the house of other people's money and joint finances. It's also the house of power and empowerment, right? It's the house where everything that sort of causes us to feel lack of control or causes us to feel disempowered actually lies in the 8th house. And so, you know, with Mercury transiting through the 8th house, there's a few different things going on here. We might be thinking about our old wounds, our old insecurities, old fears, old anxieties, and a lot of that might be coming up to the surface, especially this week as it relates to relationships. You know, you could have a lot of really intense communication or even just reflection, right, and thoughts bubbling up from past relationships, fears and anxieties and old wounds and old traumas from past relationships that might sort of resurface this week. You might have a communication from an ex, you know, maybe from a really intense sort of situation from the past, or maybe because of an intense situation that's coming in right now. You know, conversations and communication with friends this week can be a little bit more dicey, a little bit more intense, a little bit more passionate. There could be arguments and disputes, you know, power struggles and that type of thing. But this is also a time to think about, also, you know, this is a time where you can really figure out and pinpoint what you want, need, and desire when it comes to your relationships, right? Because you have Venus retrograding in the 8th house. The 8th house is about letting go of old baggage, old crappy relationships, right? That were, you know, very difficult, traumatic, intense in a bad way, and letting go of the baggage associated with those relationships so that way you can move forward with greater, into greater relationships that are more in alignment with what you want, need, and desire in all of your relationships, right? This is not just about romantic partnerships, but it can especially be. You know, your conversations this week might be a little bit darker, a little bit more intense. This is a really great week to spend time in solitude, to focus on research and to get to the bottom of something that's sort of been bothering you or bugging you or plaguing you for quite some time. And as we come into Friday, you might get a little bit of insight, either through dreams, meditation, through some sort of creative outlet, right, through journaling, especially with Mercury involved. That could be something that you could really do a little bit more easily, but you might get some insight that might help you to deal with either some sort of power issue, some sort of financial issue involving power or disempowerment or fear surrounding resources, some sort of power struggle in relationships. Whatever it is that you're going through this week, you might get some insight as we come into Friday. Just make sure that you don't act on that insight or that intuition impulsively, right? Because that's going to be Mars. So you might be thinking and overthinking and obsessing about something this week. And, you know, on Friday, you might find yourself with an outlet for that energy, but you might not want to just express it, you know, all at once. You might want to just kind of sit on that and just think things through before you communicate. But you can get that insight, you can get that download, you can get that inspiration and information. It's going to come from like a subconscious level, or it's going to come from a deeper realm or a deeper place. So if you're doing that searching, if you're spending that time in solitude, this is really a week for you in particular, where, you know, the moon is going to be in Capricorn, Aquarius, and into Pisces. So at the start of the week, you're going to find yourself being forced to be sort of out in the world. But as we come to the end of this week, when we have this trine going on between Mercury and Neptune in particular, you're also going to have the moon in Pisces in your 12th house. So at the end of this week, you're probably going to feel like kind of going inward and spending time alone in solitude in your own space anyway. And that's going to be a really good way to utilize that energy and to get in touch with those deeper realms, those other dimensional energies, that deep sort of insight and inspiration that you'll need to solve the problems that'll help you to become more empowered moving forward. For Taurus and for Taurus rising, you're going to be having a lot of energy this week around relationships, because you have not only Venus retrograding in Scorpio in your 7th house, but Mercury's coming into that conjunction. So this is going to highlight the need to communicate something in your current relationships, past relationships. This can bring up really intense communication and conversations that help you to release any old wounds, trauma, power struggles in relationships, so you can move forward with greater clarity in terms of what you want, need, and desire in all of your relationships, all of your one-on-one one-on-one close connections in life. This is going to be in square with Mars later in the week on Friday, so there could be some sort of power struggle or conflict or dispute going on involving your work, your career, your public reputation. You could have some harsh communication coming in from a boss or an authority figure, so just kind of be on the lookout for that. This is a fleeting aspect, right? So don't overthink it. Don't, stress about it too much, because whatever it is that comes in, it's not going to last. But especially for people who have that sun, moon, rising at the middle degrees of Taurus, you're going to be feeling this the most, and you're going to have the most energy and opportunity for conflict and dispute at the end of this week. So, just kind of paying attention to that and being aware of that, and making sure that you don't speak before you think, especially when it comes to your coworkers, your close personal relationships, right? Your marriage partnerships, in particular, business partnerships, that type of thing. Make sure that you're, thinking things through, and you're not just saying something just because you feel it in the moment or just because you're angry in the moment. Make sure that you're responding rather than reacting to that email or to that, communication that comes in. With Mercury in a really nice trine with Neptune, what's going really well for you at the end of this week is going to be connecting with your friends, social networks, groups of people, doing something charitable, right? Giving back to other people, doing something creative within a group of friends. This would be like a good weekend or a good, Friday to go out. Honestly, you could indulge in go out and drink or do something to sort of escape the day-to-day grind and day-to-day reality, because that's Neptune, right? But Neptune's in a positive aspect as long as you don't go at it too hard, right? And this is a really good time to do something creative with a group of people, or do something charitable with a group of people this weekend. So that's something that you can think about doing. But I think, coming into Friday and coming into the weekend, the focus is going to be more on, your friends, your social networks, wanting to be a part of a group. For Gemini and for Gemini rising, this energy with Mercury is happening in your 6th house. So there's going to be a lot of energy around your work, your day-to-day routines. You're going to probably be quite busy this week. And so there could be some sort of conflict coming in, maybe a conflict or a difference in belief systems between you and a coworker, or you and somebody who you interact with a lot in your day-to-day work environment, you and a subordinate, right? If you are somebody who is in a position of power in your work. And so just be careful not to say something that you don't mean, or to react to something rather than responding. So make sure that you're taking the time to think things through, especially at the end of this week. If something does come up that's a little bit irritating, or that if a communication comes in from a coworker or surrounding your work, or surrounding, it could be your beliefs around health, right, and medicine, because this is the 6th house of health and this is the 9th house of beliefs. Or there could be a sudden opportunity that comes to you to travel for work. Maybe don't just jump on that right away, right? If it is an opportunity to travel for work, that might actually be a good utilization of that energy, because you're going to be having Neptune in your 10th house of career coming into a trine with Mercury in your 7th house, or in your 6th house of work, right, in daily routines. So that can help to sort of dissolve and shake up and soften your day-to-day work routine, especially if you've been feeling like you've been sort of grinding away and really focusing a lot on your work and your work habits and all of that. But the energy with Mercury coming into this square with Mars, it could bring a conflict of beliefs. It could bring some sort of argument or dispute about the bigger picture when it comes to your work, or when it comes to your health, right? So communicating with doctors and healers and things like that, there could be a conflict, or maybe even like a conflict of interest or something like that, or an ethical conflict that comes up for you. Or if you work in a healing field, that could be part of it as well, like an ethical conflict that comes up. All right. Or in general, I would say, for your work, an ethical conflict that comes up, right? Because that would make sense. But anyway, for Cancer and for Cancer rising, this Mercury energy is happening in your 5th house, which is the house of fun, play, romance, children, your inner child, your passions, the things that you love to do. So there's a lot of energy around that this week. And especially if your passions involve doing something really creative, intuitive, doing something where you're focusing your energy and attention really intensely on something that you're really passionate about, creating something beautiful, right? That's Venus, in Scorpio in your 5th house. There might be a lot of communication around romance, love interests, right? If you are in a romantic relationship, this is a time when you can play and explore a little bit more. There could be a little bit of conflict coming in at the end of this week, and power struggles involving, romantic partnerships, especially love affairs, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, flings, that type of thing. But, for the most part, I do think this energy is going to really enhance your creativity. It's going to enhance your compassion for your children, for all the children around you. Maybe you're getting irritated or something like that. Maybe you've been really busy, with childcare or something like that. And so this is going to make it so it feels a little bit easier. You're going to come back into a little bit more balance through this energy. But there could be conflicts, there could be disputes, there could be power struggles involving children, there could be power struggles or disputes or anger expressed in that manner. There could also be this could also just be a really intense energy that causes you to take your creative passions and act on it, right? Do something with that, because you're going to have a lot of really intense energy going on right now. You're really going to want to focus on the things that you love to do because you love to do it. So this is a really great time, especially this weekend, for you to go out and just do something fun, do something that you're passionate about, create something, right? So it's a pretty low-key energy, except for that sort of potential on Friday for arguments to come up or for a little bit of tension to arise. Okay, so for Leo and for Leo rising, you have this Mercury conjunction to Venus, and Mercury in general is transiting through your 4th house of the home, family, property, your roots, right? And so this could bring up, so the beginning of this week could be a nice time to bring up any sort of important conversation that you need to have with your family members or involving your property, maybe with your landlord or property manager. You need to have some sort of conversation or renegotiating the terms of your mortgage or your lease or something like that could be a really good way to use this energy, actually. And it could work to your benefit, although I would do it at the start of the week and not at the end of the week, because there could be a lot of conflict with contracts and agreements involving your home, your family, your property that comes about later this week. So at the start of this week is a good time to initiate some sort of conversation that could be really important, and I think it could be more balanced, more harmonious. It could go a lot more easily for you. You could be thinking about making plans that involve your family, that involve something that's going to bring more balance, harmony, equilibrium to your family structure, to your family situation. Those conversations and those plans are really great to sort of reflect on and hone in on and refine during the Venus retrograde period while you have Mercury conjunct Venus. And then at the end of this week, there is potential for disputes and arguments involving your home, your property, your family. Within the family unit, there could be more disputes, more arguments, that type of thing. But, if you align yourself with your intuition and you focus on, because you're going to be compassionate, even though you might be a little bit more argumentative, or the people around you might appear to be more argumentative, you're going to feel much more compassion toward them. So, lean toward that compassionate side as opposed to the need to be right, or the need to argue your point, or the need to react to something, right? Or the need to defend yourself against your family if that is something that arises. But for the most part, I think that, that Neptune compassion and idealism and that sort of loving, connected energy that's going to be coming in, that's going to probably soften a lot of that. So I don't think it's going to be as difficult as it could be. So for Virgo and for Virgo rising, you're going to be having this Venus conjunction to Mercury in square with, or that's going to actually be happening in your 3rd house, the house of communication, the house of the way that you express your ideas and thoughts, the way that you interact with people in your day-to-day environment, in your immediate surroundings, right? So this is the house that rules neighbors, community, friends, or not friends, but like siblings, extended family members, cousins, that type of thing. And so, this could be a really good time for communication or marketing, or, just conveying some sort of idea or sending a really important message or email at the start of this week, especially on Monday. So if there's something that you've been needing to get out there, and there's something that you've been needing to say and you haven't been able to say it, or maybe there's been too much conflict, floating around in the ethers and you haven't felt comfortable, the start of this week is a time when you can actually do that. I would avoid having any sort of major confrontations involving your coworkers if you can, or at least think about being more compassionate. Think about taking time to reflect before you speak, right? Because you are going to have, at the end of this week, Mercury will be in square with Mars. Mercury's in your 3rd house of communication. Mars is in your 6th house of work, your work environment, your coworkers. And so there could be like a difficult email or a difficult message that comes in, and you might not you might not want to respond in a nice, kind, compassionate way, but Neptune is going to, you know, call on you to do that. And or instead of, you know, just reacting and responding, confront that person face to face, because right now you're going to have a lot of really compassionate communication on a one-on-one level with people, with Neptune being in your 7th house, right, of partnership. And this is a great week. Oops. This is a great week for communication within marriage partnership, right? This is a great week for communication in any sort of one-on-one relationship with other people. It's just there could be a little bit of conflict or a little bit of busyness in your work too. It doesn't necessarily have to be conflict. It could just be that Mercury square Mars, Mercury in your 3rd house of communication. Most of us, you know, nowadays work in a job where we have a lot of like emails, text messages, phone calls, a lot of communication coming in at all times. It could just be a very busy week and a very strenuous week at the end of the week, like on Friday, where there's a lot of communication that needs to go out and that needs to happen. It could just feel a little intense or a little overwhelming. All right, for Scorpio and for Scorpio rising, this energy is happening in your sign. So now's the time when you're probably coming into a lot of thoughts, a lot of communication, and a lot of ideas, right? Because this is the time when you're sort of thinking about your own self-interest. You're thinking about your public image and the way that you're showing up in the world, especially with Venus going in retrograde, right? Maybe rethinking the way that you present yourself, maybe rethinking your image, maybe wanting to sort of remake yourself out in the world in one way or another. This is not an ideal time, by the way, to do like a big extreme makeover or something like that. You know, Venus retrograde, usually you might go a little too extreme and you might not like the results. So just kind of keep that in mind. But, you know, you might be rethinking about the way that you present yourself out in the world. And so there's a lot of thoughts and ideas about what you want to create, what you want to make out in the world right now with Mercury transiting your sign of Scorpio. This week, Mercury is actually going to be coming into that conjunction with Venus. So, you know, if you need to rehash some sort of old conversation, bring up an old connection, reconnect with somebody from your past, right, that you've been wanting to reconnect with, that would be the time when you could really do that, when you could reach out and branch out and initiate and engage in that communication a lot more easily. And, you know, pretty much anything that you want to do involving communication, you know, showing up to articulate your thoughts in a beautiful way, sending an important message to somebody, doing something really important involving marketing, anything that has to do with your own self-image and the way that you present yourself out in the world, or the way that you communicate your ideas out in the world. You're going to kind of have the green light to do that at the start of this week, especially because the moon will also be in Capricorn, right? And so on Monday, the moon in Capricorn making really nice aspects in your 3rd house of communication. You know, with this really nice conjunction happening in your sign of Scorpio, especially if you have your sun, moon rising around, you know, 8-9 degrees in Scorpio, you're going to be feeling that really intensely in a very positive way. So that's going to sort of lighten you up. If you've been feeling kind of awkward or you've been having a difficult time with the Venus retrograde, this is a time when, you know, you might have a little bit of an easier time, because Mercury will help you to communicate a little bit more easily, to feel like you're a little bit more confident in what you're saying and the way that you say it, and it'll be a little bit easier for others to receive your communication during that time. The other thing that's going to be going on is that you're going to be having this really nice trine going on between the Mercury in Scorpio and Neptune in your 5th house of passion, of love, of creativity, of romance. And so this is a really great time, especially with Venus being involved, you know, to a certain extent as well, to do something that you love to do, to branch out, be creative, right? Thinking about reincorporating old hobbies that you used to incorporate into your life, old things that are creative that you used to do and that you used to really enjoy, and maybe you sort of let fall away, right? And so for Scorpio rising, this is a good time to pick back up where you left off when it comes to any sort of creative project, any sort of creative endeavors, any sort of hobby, passion, interest, something that you truly love to do. There could be some conflict involving your home, your family, your property, or some really intense communication that might be a little bit disruptive or sudden or unexpected or sort of intense that might come in around the end of the week as well. But I think that you're going to be able to see the bigger picture. You're going to be in a very loving, compassionate mindset and mood. And so, you know, instead of arguing with your family members, instead of debating the right move to take, or the right plans, or whatever it is, because your thoughts are probably going to be racing a little bit at the end of this week. You might be thinking, overthinking, ruminating. Your mind might be moving very quickly, and your mouth might move just as quickly. So just rein it in if you can. Maybe don't say that thing or send that email until you've thought it through and given it a second, and put yourself in the other person's shoes, because you do also have this really great energy with Neptune that allows you to be empathic and considerate of other people's needs, and a lot more compassionate, right? But if you lean on your intuition as opposed to your mind, which is going to be firing very quickly, you're going to be able to see what's really going on. You're going to be able to make better decisions and communicate more effectively, again, at the end of this week. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, you have Mercury and Venus in a conjunction in your 12th house. The 12th house is the house of solitude, seclusion, rest. So this is a time to rest your brain. Maybe, just rein it back in a little bit. Take some time out to rest, reflect, relax a little bit. Even though, at the start of this week, you will have the moon transiting your second house, so money and finances and work might be a little bit more on your mind than normal. With all of this energy in the 12th house, you need some time to relax and retreat. And so the start of this week is the time to do that and to get that. And maybe you can relax with a partner. Maybe you can do something really creative, intuitive, spiritual with your partner, right? Go on some sort of spiritual retreat. Do some sort of journaling or creative exercise, because that's very much a 12th house thing. Take a dream workshop, or just pay attention to your dreams. Write them down, because you could be getting some really important messages or creative inspiration coming in, especially at the start of this week. This is a really great time also this week for you to just relax at home, because this is going to be in a really nice trine with Neptune. So this is a really good time for creative projects in the home. This is really, this is a really good time for creative projects in the home. This is a really great time for compassionate connections with your family members. And this is just a really low-key time for you to sort of be working behind the scenes. There could be some intense communication that comes in from an unexpected source. So because the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, and you'll have Mercury coming into a square with Mars, which is in your third house of communication, you could have an unexpected communication that comes in out of nowhere that sort of stems from somebody who's working against you behind the scenes. And so there could be some conflict in that area. You might have an unexpected sort of communication that comes in at the end of this week that sort of shakes things up, and it could be a little foggy and confusing for you to really understand what it is to do, what it is that you need to do with that message, or with that confrontation that comes about. But again, if you rely more on your intuition, if you take time out, take time away, maybe don't respond directly, or maybe don't respond right away, that's going to be your best bet, because you have this really beautiful Neptunian energy trining Mercury in your 12th house. So this is a time of reflection, not a time of necessarily just jumping out and acting and making a decision all at once. Okay, for Capricorn and Capricorn rising, Mercury is conjunct Venus in your 11th house. That's the house of friends and social networks. So this could be a really good time for you to connect with groups of people, either in real life or via the internet. If you wanted to do something really important involving social media and getting a message out there, at the start of this week, that would be a really nice time when you could do that a little bit more easily. And especially because you're having this really nice trine happening here between Mercury in your 11th house, which rules social networks, it rules the internet, it rules connecting with groups of people, it rules humanitarian types of efforts and pursuits, in this really beautiful trine with Neptune, which is in your third house of communication, right? So if you want to do something creative involving communication, involving the internet, blogging, writing something, whatever it is that you want to do, connecting with people in a more compassionate way, finding a good spiritual community, right? That's Neptune in the third house. Now's a time when you can really do that, and you can really act on and engage that energy. The other thing that's going on is there could be some sort of conflict or dispute or difficult conversation that needs to be had involving money, resources, finances, because you have that Mars that's been transiting your second house for quite some time. Mercury's activating that in a square, and Mercury's coming from your 11th house, and it's going to be in that conjunction with Venus retrograde. So revisiting some sort of conversation involving money, resources, and finances that involves groups of people, that involves maybe a charitable effort, that involves your friends. Maybe you lent somebody money and you need to kind of talk about that, right? You need to have that conversation that might be a little bit hard. Or you just might have some sort of communication that comes in from the outside that is a little bit shocking or a little bit hard to deal with, where it's going to cause some sort of conflict, right? And so if that does come up, just, think about sitting back, reflecting, not just jumping in and reacting. Give yourself time to respond. You're going to be thinking a little bit more intuitively and creatively, so your intuition will be online, very much so. So, thinking about things intuitively, trusting your gut, looking at the signs, synchronicities, and symbols that are sort of guiding you and showing you the way. That's going to be your best bet in getting clarity if there is some sort of conflict that arises. For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, a lot of energy around career, public reputation, what it is that you're doing out in the world, what it is that you're creating out there, right? Bigger picture. And so at the start of this week, if you have to have an important work-related communication that you need to, talk something out with somebody, you need to pitch an idea, you need to send an important email, you need to talk with your boss or some sort of person in a higher position of authority, that's the time when you can do it, is at the start of this week, and I think it could go quite well. Also at the end of this week too, but that could cause a little bit more conflict. So there could be some sort of conflicting message or some sort of difficult communication that could come in from the outside at the end of this week, so on Friday, and it could be, something involving work, right? Some sort of conflict involving your career, your work, or it could just be that you're overthinking your work situation or your career situation, or it could just be that you have a lot of communication coming in, work-related communication, and it's quite intense and you're feeling really frustrated with it, right? But just kind of looking at the bigger picture and looking at how what you're doing right now is creating a lot of a really nice foundation for you when it comes to your resources. This is also a really great time for creative ideas that can help to contribute to your resources, right? Because you have this Mercury conjunct Venus in the 10th house of career. Venus is, a deeply creative planet, and it's going to be in this really nice trine in water with Neptune, which is in your second house of resources. And Neptune also has an association with spirituality and creativity, deeper sort of forms of creativity where the expression is coming from a deeper place. And so you can incorporate more creativity into your work and into the way that you generate resources. You could also, engage in some sort of creative project that could have a little bit more of a payoff later on. Creative forms of communication, like, creative writing, or writing, if you're somebody who writes, right, writing a novel, writing something creative, you can have a lot of inspiration that comes through this week that can really help you. And I think you're going to be feeling a lot of compassion toward your bosses, your coworkers, the people that you interact with as it relates to your career. So even if a message comes in and it feels kind of harsh, or even if you're feeling kind of frustrated with what's going on, you're still going to be able to maintain that sense of compassion and connectedness and empathy because of that Neptune trine. So, it should pan out quite well. And then for Pisces and for Pisces rising, this energy is happening in your 9th house, which is the house of your beliefs. It's the house of foreign travel. Maybe you've been thinking about making some sort of travel plans, but you've been kind of hesitating or waiting on that, or you need to refine or go back and change travel plans that have already been made. That could be part of it as well, because you have that Mercury conjunct Venus, which is in retrograde, right? This is a good time to connect with people in foreign countries, people that live long distance from you. This is also a really good time to, do any sort of creative work that has to do with your education, to connect with teachers, to connect with people as it relates to education, to connect with a tutor or something like that, or a teacher, right? This could also be just you looking and thinking more about the bigger picture and how your day-to-day life and your day-to-day routines and your day-to-day thoughts make up the broader perspective and sort of frame your reality in terms of that bigger picture. So looking at your beliefs, rebalancing and reharmonizing your beliefs about God, the universe, the world around you. Maybe you're thinking about learning something new. Now would be a time when you could, start to engage and start to work on that or work toward that. There could be some sort of conflict coming in, or I feel like it's a conflict more of like beliefs, especially religious or philosophical values or beliefs, because this is Mars in your 12th house of hidden enemies. And so somebody could be coming out of the woodwork that could challenge your belief systems, that could challenge your deeply held values and ethical beliefs. And so, maybe just take some time. You are going to be feeling a lot more loving, compassionate, creative, connected, especially because Neptune in Pisces is being activated by this really nice trine with Mercury in your 9th house. But yeah, there could be some sort of dispute, and it could kind of come from a place that is unexpected, or a place that's sort of hidden, so you might not really understand where this is actually coming from. This could just be a mental dispute that's going on in your own mind, or you're having some sort of like philosophical conflict, right, or some sort of moral dilemma. That could be part of it too. But if you lean toward your intuition, if you lean toward making decisions and figuring things out from that deeper place, that's going to really help to guide you through, you know, whatever the conflict is that arises for you. All right, so that's Pisces and Pisces rising. So that's all 12 signs, you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe. Click the little red button. And if you want to book a reading with me, you can always do that. The link is in the description below. And make sure that you sign up for the course, the webinar that I'm doing with Robert Phoenix, and my foundational astrology course. I do still have, I think, 3 spots open. So if you want to get in on that and get some really intensive foundational astrology knowledge, definitely sign up. The link for that is in the description below. All right, thank you so much, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.